All right, guys, we are back again. Dynamic Man Podcast, episode 24 with Trina Nuance. It has been 4 months. I have been up across the pond and back, and we are resuming some of our conversations about male and female dynamics. And today, the topic is female toxicity, or let's say toxic femininity is probably a better way to put it. And we may do some contrast of that with like toxic masculinity, but this is an interesting topic. Trina wanted to talk about this topic, and I'm very happy that you want to talk about it because I do think it's in vogue right now. The last decade really talked a lot about toxic masculinity, which of course is a real thing. I don't think a lot of what they characterized as toxic masculinity was necessarily toxic masculinity, but there is definitely such a thing as that. But toxic femininity doesn't really get as much attention. So let's go into this, Trina.
I also think it's super relevant with the whole attention economy thing, right? Mm-hmm. Now everybody is fighting for attention, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's actually a really apropos situation that's going on right now, which I think is only one aspect of toxic, femininity. But there's we were just talking about this off camera, but didn't have a chance to go into it. Like, there's this huge blow up going on right now on Twitter because like Sarah Strock or whatever, what is that? Is that her name? She's some like right winger. I don't really follow these people very much, but she got engaged. She posted a photo of her engagement ring, and immediately it is like all these right wing girls are all like going after each other. They're like, one's saying it's like, oh, it's only that big. Oh, where's the husband? Oh, like. And then there's, they're saying like, oh, you like to, you're slumming basically, you fuck black guys, you're a single mom. This is like, and you're seeing this and you're like, this is crazy. Why are you guys like, why are you guys wilding out like this? Like,
wait, so I'm unfamiliar. If I passed it, I forgot it. Was it just a picture of the engagement and she's famous already or something?
She became famous like a few months ago because she was in, one of those political like roundtables. I find this stuff kind of like really obnoxious format. I think it's like the red light thing where you have like some clown who's trying to like, hates conservative people, and then you have like a circle of like dissidents who like they bring one in the middle and then they argue about stuff. And it's I don't really know what to say about it, right? Sometimes these clips go viral, but she went viral for that. She had a good monologue. I'm not whatever, but the bottom line is like she became kind of famous. You have a pretty blonde girl who says something based and then she's gonna take off, right? That's how it is. That's how the algorithm works. So, but of course, this created a lot of like coping and seething among other right-wing e-girls. So you have all these different factions, and I don't want to like get into all the names of all the different people. It's not really important. To be honest, like I have like very little opinion on even this like Sarah girl, and she's posted an engagement ring photo, but I think it's just like funny how something that you would think would just get an innocuous kind of response, maybe like a congratulations, scroll past, whatever, immediately becomes this whole like cat fight. And it's like a real cat fight. I mean,
girls are so vicious. Like,
yeah.
The healthy response, even that, like, I even hate framing it as like healthy versus unhealthy now. I'm so tired. I wish that words didn't get like that. They get like, words themselves get doggy piled by perception online. And then I'm like, I feel like I can't use this because there's so many associations that I can't even, like, I just have to risk being misunderstood as hell or whatever. Nuance's problem, right? You're very familiar with that. Mm-hmm. But when women react to something positive or feminine energy, and they doggy pile it in all these ways that are just like throwing shame and hate on it. On one level, we all have, it's an open forum, right? We are all allowed to like just be like, fuck that, that's lame or whatever. But on another level, and on a very deep level, and especially when people take it to that extreme, where a symbol of somebody's beauty is being like nitpicked, and you have to find like the one flaw with it and blow that up so that that person, whatever good happened, is now tainted and contaminated. You know, it comes from a very hurt place. Um, and obviously there's a lot of lonely, sad, unloved, or wounded people in the world. So these stories, it's interesting that you always, I question myself for how much I like get tired and explain it online about like, shut up about this random trend story and this gossip celebrity. But I realize like I don't actually have a problem with stories. Like I love talking about stories. I guess it's something else about that turns me off. But it's actually a really good axiom, as you always, I think, is one of the things that you're good at, is like, you know, something will be viral, or some story like this, and it's a good medium to examine and narrate what's actually happening. Because when women are ruining an outcome or a quality that they want or envy, I almost feel like it's defending that desire or that lack thereof by attacking it.
Well, I think envy. So this is something I definitely think we want to zoom in on, because, you know, you've got like the 7 deadly sins, right? Male or female, all capable of it. But envy, it seems to be one that is particularly very feminine. The desire to have what somebody else has, or to tear down. Because I think, you know, envy and jealousy are often used as synonyms, but they're not exactly the same thing. Jealousy is like wanting what somebody else has, but envy is like resenting them for having something else. So, and it's not simply like, man, I wish I had that. It's, I'm gonna take it away from them so that I can get it for me. It's almost like a reflexive, like anybody else has it, then they can't have it if I can't have it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, that's obviously what came forward, you know, with this post. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that like the envy dovetails with another big sin, right, which is vanity. So you have like the vanity envy axis, where it's like, who's getting the most attention, who's the most like base right-wing e-girl, you know, and it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. But I mean, I know that that's just like a little subset. I'm only mentioning it because it's like blowing up all over. Yes,
No,
it was
I love that distinction, because you know, you can respond to something and be like, wow, I want that beauty, I want that money, I want that attention, I want that outcome in love, I want that whatever. And it can, you know, maybe it can sting a little, and then be like, wow, I need to go to the gym because I want that body. Or it can almost have you sparring with a ghost at a minimum, and at a maximum, like actually attacking that person and like trying to take it from them, out of this dark shadow thing. Versus, oh, I want that body, so my version of having that is going to the gym and like maybe like not eating 10 burgers a day or something, you know.
Jealousy can be constructive. Like you can even hear it. Like some people say, I'm so jealous. Like you can even hear it. Like they're like, oh, they can almost be excited for you. Like it sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I know that's somewhat semantic usage, but jealousy, I think, you know, it maybe if it errs on the side of negative, it's only because it's like, it's a realization of lack in something. And you could argue that you should be, you know, the response to it is gratitude in some cases. The response in other cases is to, you know, be more motivated, move forward, try to get that goal. But yeah, envy does not seek any kind of like constructiveness. Envy is like Mean Girls in the movie, right? Where Lindsay Lohan starts to give, I don't know what's her name, she gives her like those like super weight gaining protein bars, right? That's a little bit different because she's actually trying to, but you understand what I mean. It's a similar kind of thing. Like
Sabotage.
Someone's in great shape, so you try to sabotage them with something that's going to mess them up.
Something that's really unfortunate on anybody on like a growth journey, which I'm sure I'd be surprised if you hadn't experienced this before, but it's like, if you're growing and you're always growing and you're, you know, then you can definitely be targeted as competition for getting more pretty or getting more attention or getting whatever, like raising your own bar. And a side effect is that you trigger envy. And that's something I've personally suffered from a lot. And it's funny because I don't think it's really hard for me to distinguish sometimes between like malicious and just subconscious wounds or whatever. And I don't really prefer to stick around and find out what the difference is usually. But even if they're not like, even if it's not personal, like people will compete against their lack versus focus on themselves, because their fixation on that lack is easier to fixate on you than it is with themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's like the whole crab bucket, right? That the second that you start to pull ahead of a baseline, you know, if you pull ahead of a crowd, then you start to get pulled down to their level. Or you risk being like really ostracized. And this is the choice that people make. You know, it's kind of interesting. Like I was thinking about this the other day, like the journey of an individualist. Like you are, you know, you might push forward, you break out of the mold. That's really hard. You get rejected by all these people and then you're freed, right? But then if you become excellent, you have all sorts of people who then, you know, adore you, right? A lot of people look up to you because you've now done something different, or you've, you know, you've shown a different way of living. But there's actually like it gets harder and harder in some ways, because in the beginning, okay, you're just around people and they're familiar, and then but you have to break out of it. So yeah, that's difficult because you had all these connections and comfort with them. But you know, they were kind of holding you back and they never really believed in you anyway, right? They just wanted you to be on their level. So some of you can be like, it was good that I left them. But then but you get to certain levels, right? And then maybe you grow again. Like you might be praised for something that then you later tweak a little bit differently. You know what I mean? Like your growth journey then moves you away from where the crowd wanted you to be. And now you're demonized again. And I think in some ways it's harder to lose approval that you've gained than it is to like, it's like you have to constantly be willing to like sacrifice that vanity on the process of growing. Anyway, I don't know if that's exactly, there's some elements of that
No,
can
no,
tie
I think that's a really good point, right? Because if you decide to level up more than once in your life, somebody inspired me talking about that the other day. Like you don't have to just peak once. Like there's always another level, right? Whether it's in health, wealth, relationships. You talk about this with intimacy and a marriage, blah, blah. Like if you do that more than once and you've resonated with a certain level of something with a group, and then that resonance lowers as you grow, you are going to keep going through that experience. And it's like, it's almost sacrificial. And as a feminine energy, if we're talking about feminine energy, belonging is all we want to, you know, we just want to belong. So like to be able to do that at least once is already something so difficult to ask the feminine that I don't really know that you can go through. We're going to get like, you know, woo woo, like death and rebirth. So to ask a feminine energy to do that more than once, let alone like, like 2-3 plus times or whatever, like that's you either get I mean, you probably either get nuked or or you're some other specimen.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty, like as a man who ends up in a relationship with a woman who really embodies that, is that you know, because she is performing to some extent for attention and validation, he gets sort of roped into that performing role. You know, it's kind of like what serves the brand. You know, we have to do this thing. We have to go to this place. We have to take these photos. We have to it. You know, I think some guys are obviously more cut out for it than others. And I'm not saying that a woman can't be an influencer, and if a woman's an influencer, then she's toxic. I'm not saying that at all. But there is certainly this like tendency to seek, you know, approval from the crowd. And, you know, I actually was like I didn't intend to sort of linger on the topic, but it is something in like, especially these like right-wing Twitter circles, that you have a lot of these women really are, and that's why it's like it's so funny to see them just like air each other's dirty laundry, because like they're like, most of them have done some pretty fucked up stuff. And they're just like,
why do you think they have to perform as good as so much? Because they've done stuff. Like, I think I almost get suspicious if somebody's too, like, I'm sorry, there's two directions there, but this is a really good point that you landed on, because first of all, you ask the man that in what you just brought up the scenario of a guy and a woman who's like an influencer. You almost are asking him to compete with all the attention she gets from the internet. And like, that's, inherently not really. So I think qualitatively, the attention and the bond needs to compete with it. Otherwise, not compete, but like, it needs to be so strong that that's not as much of a threat in some way. Or actually, I think both are necessary. Her sense of validation can't be primarily reliant on this internet stuff, which is really tricky, fine line to think.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those relationships really are like image relationships. I mean, people talk about the celebrity relationships. Like, a lot of them, I'm not so like cynical that I don't think that these celebrity relationships actually are all fake. Like, I actually think that they genuinely do get into each other. And, it's not surprising that they would, to some extent, because they have such unique experiences that they can't probably relate to a lot of regular people. So there's an automatic comfort and sense of, belonging, that you guys are both dealing with paparazzi, you're both dealing with film or, performance, whatever. But the problem is, because the eyes are on them, it makes it very difficult for their relationship to ultimately be real over time, because they become very, I think, self-aware of the relationship and how the relationship is affecting image. And so it's like, okay, well, we have to put on this look here, because if paparazzi sees something, you know what I mean? So that sort of like inclination that we have to put on this act to maintain an appearance then ends up hollowing out the relationship. And I've seen this, like, having known some politicians firsthand. Their relationships are trash, almost invariably terrible relationships, because it is one big image. I mean, first off, the guy is typically working. I mean, or the woman actually is typically working a lot. They're not even with their spouse. So there's the distance aspect, but it's also that, they want to maintain this kind of image because they want to get, you have to be the perfect kind of conservative couple or whatever. And the reality is that they're just like, they're sleeping with interns, or like sometimes they're gay. There's all sorts of stuff that's just like really beneath the surface, and it comes up in these dirty secrets. That's what's happening right now. And with among these little e-girls are all trashing each other, because you'll have certain commentary that they're going to be saying that, oh, we need to have this kind of, like Ashley St. Clair. Here's a great example. I mean, from months ago, right? This is somebody who's like, she's against being like a single mom. We need to stop divorce. We need, it's just all this stuff. And like, now she's literally like pimping herself out to try to get pregnant by a rich guy. Like,
wait, how?
Oh, first off, she was already like a single mom.
Okay.
She was with a boyfriend. They broke up or something like that. But then she got pregnant with Elon Musk's baby. Then she got pregnant with Elon Musk's baby.
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And she's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like, when you hear the kind of stuff that goes on at CPAC, among various influencers, like the secrets come out that, one's actually gay, another one's like 80% of them are doing something that is very off-brand in their public life to their personal life. You got maybe 20% that are actually like congruent and clean. So I think that this ties into the whole like toxic femininity thing, which is that focus on the superficial, focus on the appearance, needing to be like, being to be liked and perceived in a certain way. I think that's one element of it.
This ties back to what we somewhere we landed when I was in Mexico, and we talked about fear versus whatever, one of the last episodes, maybe the last one. And I landed on this idea organically live on your podcast. And then now I've like used it a million times in different ways, of the movie Avatar being this foreshadow for the collective, in terms of, I feel like women have a relationship with an avatar version of their sense of self, even if they lack an online presence, because of just how immersed we are in the digital world. And the reason I'm bringing that up is use it to examine this, because if you can outsource your coping or shame through your internet avatar, so say she's shameful about being like a single mom, and then she can parade over here and collect validation against that, like that's a really tricky tool to have. And I think that's what a lot of people have done, that have like just revealed a lot of incongruence between their online and offline selves.
I think that a flip side to the toxicity is that, so there's a seeking of a validation to like almost like a false self, but then when the incongruent behavior, when things are revealed, the response is often to become a victim.
Right.
That, look at what these people said to me, look at what they said, and like how terribly I've been treated. And it's really like a complete inability to accept any accountability whatsoever for any wrongdoing. It's what is it? What is that thing? Darvo, deny, attack. What is it? They talk about it with like borderline personality disorder. Let me actually look it up real quick. But yeah, go say something. It's like a pretty.
I was gonna say toxic feminine energy is confusing, right? So if you are confusing, you're inherently lacking clarity. And if you're inherently lacking clarity, then you can, as a toxic feminine energy, tap into people's empathy, like almost as like a loophole for agency, which is like, one version of that is like being a victim and not taking any accountability. Like when we talked about rape, right? It's really tricky territory. Like, and if I'm definitely the enemy to women by saying that, just because life decided to hand me some like first front row experience with like having, like when two people talk about, I get like a little mildly triggered when I hear of women being those liabilities. And I think it's really important distinction here is like, part of shadow integration is understanding that we all have the capacity to be that liability.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging, because if you're just like a woman feeling things, then there's so much to take responsibility for now. Not just with like in your personal situations, but again, it almost makes it impossible to have any like sliver of unintegrated shadow if you're going to use the internet. Otherwise there's no way out of being a liability. And this is something I think that this goes back to when I was telling you, I want to talk about toxic feminine energy in both men and women.
Yeah.
It is so easy to, and I'm not like, I give women so much shit on the internet, so I don't feel bad saying this, but it's so easy to target us for toxic feminine energy, duh. And it should be. We should be the easiest targets for that because we are the women, right? But what doesn't make the problem better, and I'm not saying solve it altogether, maybe we always have to wrestle with this problem on some degree, but what doesn't make the problem better is nuking the feminine, the other energy in this world that is going to create the future, via the same stuff. Right? The same weaponization. So I think that the only solution, I'm curious what you would think about this. Like the only solution I could think of to those kinds of risks within dynamics, whether you're talking about like a married couple and she's an influencer or whatever it is the real life bond, the real life relationship needs to have clarity that compensates for all that can be confused by how the shadow shows up, whether it's online in a brand or, you know, flawed shadow acting out whatever in other relationships outside that relationship. It makes almost like context and human to human relationships the only solution I can think of, which is interesting, right? Because the problem itself is in total attack of that.
Yeah. So there's two things I'd say. The first, I just want to give like a little anecdote. So I didn't realize just how like effeminate social media was. Like, I know people talked about it, right? But I didn't understand just how much even many of guys in the manosphere who were online, and to be honest, like to some extent myself included, had been engaging in like really toxic feminine behavior until I went to prison. Because when you go in there, you realize that like all this kind of gossipy stuff and, you know, subtweeting and trying to show off your stuff versus somebody else, and then feeling like a victim because other people are coming after you. Like, man, you tried that shit in prison, like you're fucking done.
Oh yeah.
Like, you would get pieced up so quickly. Your reputation would sink and you would be a target. Like, no, because nobody cares. It's like, how are you going to conduct yourself? You're going to conduct yourself with respect. You're going to, as they say, stand on business, you know? And, you know, it was a good experience in a lot of ways because I got, you know, infused with a lot of that energy, having to navigate in that environment. Like, you keep your mouth shut. You don't talk about other people, right? And if you do, you know, prepare that something's going to happen. That's the way it is. Whereas on the internet, you know, there's no accountability for it. And I think, so I think a lot of influencer guys really get pulled into it, especially with certain types of content. Like, there was another thing that happened, you know, recently. It's amazing how fast the internet moves. This probably happened on like Sunday or Monday, and it's already feels like it was distant.
Yeah.
But there's this bodybuilder guy, Joey Swole. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but
I feel like I've heard of that name, but I'm really bad at recognizing things by name.
yeah, he has like he do like a lot of like gym etiquette videos, like don't bully in the gym, don't, you know, like they tried to like she tried to make him feel bad because he walked in front of her video, and you know, this isn't cool.
Oh
And
yeah, I remember that she was like doing like glute drive or something, and
yeah,
yeah,
he's done all sorts of stuff like that. And honestly, like, it's not my kind of content, but for the most part, he's been, you know, it's been wholesome, right? You know what I mean? Like, it hasn't been, he's just like, I'm this gym bro and I'm telling you guys how to like behave, right? And like be kind to each other. Anyway, he said like he was like supporting Hulk Hogan, and you know, there's a segment of the population who don't like Hulk Hogan because he said a bad word like 10 years ago.
What?
He said, I think he said like the N word. I don't know what the context was with it. You know, I never grew up with WWE, so it's all kind of like whatever to me. But the bottom line is that he started to do like these groveling, like he started to do this a big groveling apology, and then of course, like, you like, how, if you don't learn anything like from the woke mob, like you can't operate like that now in 2025. You're still doing that shit. So of course, like, it didn't make things better. Now like the people who attacked him before are still attacking him, and now the people on the right are like, you're a pussy, basically. Like you're just groveling there, like you didn't do anything wrong. Why are you even apologizing? Like, you didn't say it, you know what I mean? Like, you just said you liked Hulk Hogan, so you can't ever like Hulk Hogan because you know what I mean? So, but the reason I mention it is because he went to a toxic feminine kind of response where he's like, all I've ever done is spread like kindness for people, and now everybody's being like mean, they're treating me badly. And I'm like, man, this is like so cringy. Like, it's annoying when a woman does this stuff, and it's so predictable, and it only at this point, I think it's working less and less because I think we've moved out of that energy zone. You know, you're always going to have some simps and stuff but for a guy to do it, it's really just
Yeah.
it's really repulsive. I mean, so, and it's like funny because like this is like a big gym bro, right? And But
that unapologeticness is much more attractive. And I think that it gets conflated with not being willing to look at what you do wrong in the face, you know?
yes.
So if you know thyself, right? Like if you know what you do wrong and you're not going to be okay with all of it. And if you have no tolerance for that, then you're going to be draining quite a lot of energy, not only being apologetic, but trying to compensate for what's inevitable, which is you're going to ruffle feathers and be flawed. And
Well, I think the issue that guys have, and this is like a big element to really being a man, right? I mean, there's been a lot of stuff also floating around talking about how, higher testosterone guys are more willing to pursue what they want in face of societal, obstacles.
yeah, the reward system is different for them.
Right, right. So one of like the pieces with this stuff is it's not about not apologizing, but what are you apologizing for? Are you apologizing because you actually violated your own code, or are you apologizing because you didn't operate with integrity, which of course would be part of your own code, right? So in that case, like, you will accept accountability, or you made a judgment error and that caused a consequence. You accept responsibility for that. That's very core to being a man. Like if you're a male and you cannot accept responsibility when you fucked up, then other men are going to really look at you poorly. It's very much appreciated and respected when women do that too, but it's demanded in men. It's very much demanded in men. Like, we'll just consider you like somebody I can't do business with, I can't associate with, because you're failed. You're basically a failed specimen, and the tribe can't depend on you. The crew can't depend on you to do things. But a lot of this stuff, comes from the toxic feminine, which is this manipulation. Like, what you said didn't make me feel good, so you have to apologize. It's like, I don't have, like, I'm like, sucks that it made you feel bad, but I didn't do anything actually wrong to my code. Like, you're having a bad response to it, have a bad response.
That is weaponized all the time in your domain, dating relationships, right? Like if a woman feels bad because a guy came up to her, she can be like, oh my God, he's a creep, and like weaponize him just paying attention to a woman and being a man as now he's a creep. And now it has this like connotation of like, ew, inherently. Or like a boundary has been violated simply because you were in a public space and somebody was attracted to you. Whereas really the inherent bias to that is you didn't reciprocate attraction. So now you need to like punish somebody because of how you felt. Right. Yes. Like, and then it's like almost like, I mean, the feminine wound in the man with the guy example you just said too, is like when he pandered and apologized for, and you said the question is, are you apologizing for something that was actually in alignment with your code? I think one piece of that is like the feminine wound can manifest as when people need permission to feel instead of, just feel regardless. Mm-hmm. Like, so, she can feel however she wants to feel about being approached, and he can feel however he wants to feel in response to her being cute. Mm-hmm. And neither of them need each other's permission. They're strangers in a public place. Mm-hmm.
The healthy feminine feels what it feels, but doesn't try to make it necessarily the fault of the masculine, right? That, I'm not feeling like I'm not feeling good about this or that, but she's allowed to feel that way. Like, a man doesn't necessarily have to try to fix that. That's where a lot of these things, problems and relationships come from. But it's when I don't feel good and I'm going to make it that you did it somehow your fault. And I think that's a lot of like test stuff. When a man trusts himself and knows himself, which men as they get older tend to know themselves more and more and develop better judgment, then they're able to have much stronger boundaries around this kind of stuff, because they're like, I'm not going to, it's, you know, it's like, it's gaslighting. Like, I'm not going to be told that I did something wrong when I didn't. I'm not invalidating how you feel, but it's not, I didn't do anything wrong. Not that you should necessarily like get into an argument about it. That's not necessarily constructive, but it's the fundamental point. Like, are you having your actions and behavior twisted by this kind of stuff? I actually give you another example that's kind of like bigger picture without going too much into politics. This was like a major thing throughout my trial, where what, you know, Biden's government was trying to do was they were trying to make me dishonor myself. They were trying to make me say that I had done something, you know, morally wrong, and that, you know, everything that the way, you know, the intent to which I operated was like anti-American. And, you know, so like, it's basically like I had to denounce, they wanted me to denounce Trump. They wanted me to denounce, you know, me believing that they stole the 2020 election. Like, it was all this kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
And you know, there were, and they dangle the carrot, which is that, hey, accept responsibility that you were a bad person. You were trying to overthrow the government, that, you know, in the peaceful transition of power of a totally clean election. And, you know, and if you do that, then we won't sentence you to as much time in prison. And now look, I don't blame any J6er for taking plea deals. The system is rotten. There really was no way to win. I know that, you know, from hindsight, because no one won, not a single person. And yet I will say this, those of us who did not you know, say anything like that and refuse to do it, we all did feel like a stronger sense of self and a kind of mutual respect for each other, going in. And it's what I told my lawyer. I said, look, I can't accept a plea deal for something I didn't do. And I said, I know even if I get more time, it's going to be harder for me to be in there and feel like I had dishonored myself than it will to just go in there with my head held high. And it was easier. I was able to have that. So, I mean, that was like, that was a real, what's that?
I want to point out the nuance in your honor there, because it would be easy to say your pride had you sacrificing time that could have been spent with your family. I'm so sorry if that's kind of, but I'm defending it. It goes back to that thing that you said about good faith versus bad faith, where you are conscious, you're in touch with your conscience, and it wouldn't sit right with you to own up and pay that cost of owning up to something that on the deepest level wasn't true. You know, that transcends, like, and that's a really tricky thing to say, but like, wow.
Well, yeah, and I write about this a little bit in a piece in my book, Letters from Fort Dix, which will be coming out around Thanksgiving. But it's, I'm not like a black and white thinker. Obviously, we're both very nuanced with this.
That's why it's so easy to talk to you.
You know, if they had offered me a misdemeanor, even though I still didn't think I did anything wrong, I would have weighed the cost benefits of it. And the cost benefits to me would have been, okay, you know, I think I have to take this, because then it really is erring on the side of pride versus, you know, actually me being just true to myself. Right. And it's, you know, I think different guys are going to have different points in that spectrum. Like, because what you're totally right. There is a pride element there. And I admit that I did write a letter to the court, you know, asking for leniency. And I did take responsibility for my actions, but I took responsibility from it in a very specific way. I did not, I basically said that if I had been aware of what was happening, I would not have done what I did, which is true. But it's not because like, I'm like, so sorry.
That's what I'm trying to defend.
So sorry, Nancy Pelosi, you know, I smoked a cigarette on your balcony. Like, I feel terrible. I don't give a fuck about you. But it's
the
that
alternative to that is asking you to have no pride in who you are, in your character, and which protects your soul.
it was that I could see that I was reckless. I could see that I had not paid attention to the fact that I was being set up. I didn't say that explicitly, but I implied it I implied in the letter that I indicted my judgment in going in there, but I didn't indict my intent or like I wasn't apologetic to them for what I did. It was like a sense like I wouldn't have been as reckless about it. I would have seen that you were trying to set me up if I was
it's where you were coming from that matters.
Yeah. But I wrote it in a way that had some ambiguity for them. But it was a way that the way I wrote it was that like that was I never said anything that I could not own up to, basically.
Of course, that's almost why I don't. This is gonna. I don't know. Whatever. Lawyers.
Yeah.
Contracts. People feel safe when something bad happens to somebody. They update the agreement to add a clause that protects them from that. What do lawyers do? They leverage and or they work with that ambiguity, which everything has, to argue a case. It's the only way that, so, and the reason I'm pointing out that thought I've had before is because on the deeper level than something that's agreed to, and I'm not trying to talk about like what's smart or not to do in like profession, businesses, like definitely have agreements and shit. But on a like real level, if you can't trust somebody in soul, you really can't trust them on paper, So that's true with or without any of our human precautions and guidelines and fences around it. And I'm going to a real deep layer there. But that on the opposing side, if we're on Team Pat, is what was
yeah. And I think what's like, one of the things you learn is that the legal system, well, first off, it's not really a justice system. The legal system is in many ways a very like toxic and very kind of like toxic feminine system, because everything is about getting you to dishonor yourself. Like the entire system, like if you rat on people, you get less time. Everything is about making you into some, in the past, there was much more of a sense of honor.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Right? You could even redeem yourself in duels sometimes, or you could, men would, whatever. The point is that there is much more of like an acknowledgement of these kind of things, that if a man, had stood for something, even if they had to execute him, there'd be like, I don't know, if things were just different. They were just different. It was a different way of operating, and one that was much more, relatable, I think, on a certain
I can even tie this back to the toxic feminine, because it's like the toxic feminine energy can be if I overextend, you owe me type vibe. And that's almost what we're describing in the government, right? It's like a guilt shame economy. Like, oh, give up your, like sacrifice your dignity on the altar of like this political societal bullshit. How dare you,
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that, there's been a lot of talk like, well, things are the way they are because, men need to step up. But I think a lot of women say that, and I posted about this recently, and I talked about it on their show, but one of the core parts of men stepping up is being free of, like emotional manipulation from the toxic feminine. Like you can't doesn't mean that you're necessarily, because the toxic masculine, the actual toxic masculinity is to sort of rule with an iron fist and to not care about how it impacts the lives of anybody else. That is toxic masculinity. It is tyranny. It is direct tyranny. Whereas toxic femininity, I think at its core, is you know, pure emotional manipulation and control via guilt. So one's control via force, one's control via guilt, right? But when the masculine breaking free of toxic femininity is always going to be rebellious, right? And so you have like the devouring mother archetype where, you know, a lot of boys, for instance, who are raised by single mothers, or sometimes just mothers with the father didn't create enough of a space for the boy to come in, you know, too busy with work, and the mother was overly attached to the son. You can have a similar dynamic where the mother invests so much emotion into the boy, but to keep the boy a boy from leaving, she will emotionally manipulate him into constantly having to do things for her. I've worked with so many clients who have this big problem of trying to break free of their mother. And they really can't become fully men until they do this. So I think a lot of women may not understand the full implications of it, that it will get better for everybody when this happens, right? But at the same time, there is going to be like a humbling for a lot of women because they're going to suddenly see that. And I think they're already starting to see it to some extent, but that men are just not going to play the game that they want them to play. And
well, there's 2 points I'm going to say it out loud. There's one point of it, right? Like you could say emotional manipulation, you could call game emotional manipulation, but it's not bad faith.
depends on your intent. Yeah.
And it actually like it's attractive, right? We like, I don't whatever women want up to, like we got like when a guy has game. Sorry, objective. Like I think we can call it objectively true. The point I wanted to make in response to what you just said about the mother. First of all, it's very triggering to go after somebody's, you know, mother wound because it's like yo mama, but like on an existential level. I'm gonna try to make sense. We said an example earlier of the toxic feminine weaponizing the creep word when a guy might approach her in a public space, and how that's not really a boundary violation, and how that has to do with permission, you know, permission to feel a certain way. The reason I'm tying that to this is if your mom makes you responsible for her feelings, on one level, you know, it is a noble man's desire to protect the feminine, help her feel better, you know, but there is a tricky area where it's like they can learn that she isn't responsible for her feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that can carry out to other, you know, I had a conversation recently with a gentleman who was apologizing to me, and for some reason, I like one thing I said was, it's very nuanced, of course. I was like, you know, there's all these different possibilities. I'm okay with which, like, I don't need them to be a specific one. And so because of that view, what you're apologizing for is pretty irrelevant. Because however one of those make me feel, like, you are a human with your own world, and you know, you don't need to take responsibility for my feelings. But on another level, like, I appreciate how noble it is for you to know what effect you have, which is not toxic masculinity, right? And try to take responsibility for that. And I think that's a really important thing for women to understand is, of course, we should be positively reinforcing when men want to help us feel better, and them supporting the feminine strengthening, and et cetera, et cetera. But that shouldn't be at odds with taking responsibility for how we feel, even if he has everything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if you make me feel like shit about myself because you are, you know, doing something or saying something, and it resonates and that hurts, that's still mine.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, accountability in a woman is as attractive to a man as a man being sensitive to a woman's feelings is to a woman. Right? Like when men who are completely emotionally unaware, like they can still be men, they can still act like men, but that can be frustrating on some level for women because they might have a hard time being able to connect with them. I think that there's similar dynamics that happen. Like it shows integration when a man is able to like express himself emotionally. and able to, communicate those things while still, of course, embodying the masculine. And I think it's a similar thing for a woman to be a woman and to have these feelings, but also to be able to take accountability. Like that makes men want to cherish them even more, because it shows like a much more developed woman, because men in general, I mean, someone made this comment a long time ago, but it's on my Twitter feed, and I retweeted it. It was really, really good. But basically, like, the problem that so many men have in marriages is that because they were controlled by their mother's emotions growing up, even if the mother wasn't like a super toxic feminine woman, but just simply had some anger issues, or he learned that, like, if his mother was upset, then it was somehow he was bearing the consequence of it. When they get into a relationship with a woman, and she later on, and she has she has emotions, and she's upset about something, there's an immediate response to take it personally. Like, I did something wrong, I'm bad, which then causes the man to pull back, shut down. It's a big cycle. So, like, a lot of it is the depersonalization, like really depersonalizing from a woman's emotions. I think it's the best way that I've noticed it so much in myself. Like, um, like a major contribution to the fights that I used to have with my wife was because I had that trigger from my mother, and I became a reactive. So it's like she'd she'd be upset, and I would be like, "Well, why are you blaming me for this? Like, I didn't," you know what I mean? Like, so I get like defensive. Whereas later on, I just started to realize it's like, this isn't about me. And if she's feeling this way, just give her some space and make everything around the margins easier for her, allow her to deal with it. And what happens is that, I learned, and it got reinforced over time, like, it really wasn't about me. Like, I could be in the crossfire if I tried to involve myself in the energy, but
Yes.
if I didn't take responsibility for the energy, it didn't come on to me.
Yeah. My mother wound thing was similar, because like it's almost like honestly, I think you embolden the toxic feminine energy in whatever context by enmeshment, right?
Absolutely.
And if you're enmeshing with her emotions, you don't know where yours begin and yours end, and that's just like, conflated with empathy or caring about the way somebody feels and your ability to impact that, then that's how men get consumed by the host, as you put it, right?
Yeah.
And that's how also, you know, that can't happen to a man. Or the capacity of that to happen for a man is also within his feminine,
Mhm.
you know? Um,
Yeah, when I work with clients on, like, parental dynamics, the two things are, first, that when it comes to the father, you have to almost, like, confront or reconcile with the father. So, like, if he feels, you know, like, let down by his father's leadership, or felt like he never lived up to his father's standards, right? That's a reconciliation that has to happen in adulthood, because you have to step out of being the child, because that's an emasculating state, right? So it's not so much, it's a benefit if you end up having this good relationship with your father as a result of it, as like two equals. But even if it doesn't happen exactly like that, you're still at least breaking out of the dynamic where you are holding him responsible. Because that's the thing. It's like, if you're holding your father responsible for everything that happened, then you're in the feminine position, right? You're still his charge. You're
mm,
still looking to him like, you didn't take responsibility for me. Well, if you're a man, you take responsibility for yourself. That means absolving your father of his sins.
mm,
So that's a very important developmental milestone for men, to let that go, even if they had a terrible father. But the thing is, with the mother, that's not what you do with the mother. With the mother, it's about the boundary. With the mother, it's about, if they were enmeshed with their mother, if they were responsible for their mother's needs, they have to start saying no. They have to start putting boundaries around that. And I'm not even blaming the mothers all the time, because sometimes it is actually like they're the ones who put the need that they need to take care of the mother, but the mother never actually said that they had to, right? Like the healthy feminine like nourishes, but also knows when to stop, right? Knows when to let them go off and fend for themselves.
Yeah, because at a certain point, it's insulting to them, right? If I overnourish you, I don't. It's a lack of it devolves into a lack of faith that you got this.
That's right. It's really like women who are really healthy in their femininity do not, they love so deeply their child or their husband that they don't coddle them. That's like the real love, is that they love them so much that they're willing to let them go and grow up and do their own thing. And because they take responsibility for their own emotions, they're not making them have to maintain it, right? So it's
Yeah, and that's such a sophisticated like maternal energy that we're describing, because you probably can't ask a mother to have deeper empathy than she has for her son.
Mhm.
And then I'm gonna leapfrog and make an analogy with empath in the
Mhm.
spiritual world. That's usually a mask for not having any boundaries.
Absolutely.
So if you're asking the mother to have the deepest possible empathy for her child, which she freaking should, and you know, there's still a boundary. Like that is, he has to be his own person, you know?
Yeah, I get really tired of hearing like the empath thing. You spend enough time around those people and you're like, man, you guys are totally fucked up. Like you're alive because they don't have boundaries around anybody. And it's all like, this person used me, and I all I did was care about them, and they used me, and they're involved in all these different romantic relationships.
Not even that sophisticated. It's like, oh, I'm so empowered. Then why couldn't you say no?
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly right. There's no integration whatsoever. There's no integration whatsoever. And that's really what they should be focusing a lot more on.
Yeah. That's another toxic iteration of it that I see a lot when I was whatever. Yeah, I'm not gonna, sorry, I don't know how to talk about that without being say there's women who are like spiritual, I'm an empath, blah blah, like I'm empowered, whatever. Okay. If you are claiming you are empathetic to people's emotions, you can sense energy, your intuition is strong, then you are, in my brain, totally ruining your credibility with that being true by picking up on everything and like almost like trespassing based on what you can pick up on, right? Now, I'm not saying let's say that she does have good emotional regulation and really strong intuition, and she is this awakened, a feminine woman. Like, things are going to enter her atmosphere, and if enmeshment with all energies that enter her orbit at all times is what happens. And like, I think that's actually part of the strength of that being true, because at a certain point, it's none of your business, other people's energy. How strong are you if everybody's energies and emotions are if you're so receptive to everybody's energy and emotions to where you can't even be anchored in your own?
This is very like woo woo whatever, but if you deal with like a psychic or a clairvoyant, the really like serious ones, the ones with a lot of wisdom, are like, they never violate your space. They never violate your field, so to speak. Everything that they do is always done with complete and total permission, because you see the really good ones are really like grounded, because the ability, like, it is an absolute gift to be able to you know, have your like be able to understand other people's emotions. But the problem is that if you're not anchored yourself, then you don't simply understand other people's emotions. You become, it's like you get contagion from it. Like their whatever emotion they have then becomes your emotion, and then you try to throw that emotion onto somebody else. You're just completely dissolute. It's like flying everywhere. And those women in particular, like that's where you get into the toxic feminine, right? Because they like they're throwing their emotions everywhere. They're grabbing, you know, what you're feeling, and they're making it an issue, and they're throwing other people's stuff onto you. And you know, a man has to have a real, and women too, frankly, have to have boundaries around this and just say, no, I'm not dealing with this. You know, like you can't just like dump on me your stuff, right? And you separate from those people. But yeah, a man who would be like in his like toxic masculine would be completely like cold to people's emotions. Like really would not. There's always a healthy balance where you're anchored in yourself, but you can feel others. But you're not, you're feeling it, but you're not like you can decide sort of how much you want to feel from it, and how much, and you know, you're not going to lose yourself in the process of that kind of stuff. Because the reality is that if you're going to actually operate as a man, you have to be operating from that internal locus of control, and you can't do that. Like you need to sense other people's emotions to be able to navigate effectively and to have like the full picture. But if you're too much over there, you're not going to be in your internal locus of control, and you're going to start to become indecisive, and you're going to start to lose that polarization. And sometimes, unfortunately, I think you know, like a man does need to harden his heart, or at the very least be able to operate. I think it's frankly a little bit more sophisticated to operate in spite of having some degree of pain.
Yes. And guess what? That even if it, you know, on an indirect level seems like it might hurt the feminine, you also are protecting our feminine energy from being able to drift more into darkness.
Well, that's it. And you know, I think what you're saying is really important, because this gets into so many things like energetic and physical, that the men, even like in a tribe, were the ones who protected the perimeter. So the women, like, so in a relationship, the man is really what he's supposed to do on some level. Like we have all these interpersonal dynamics we're talking about, but on a certain level, what he's also doing is he's creating like a field protecting the woman. So the woman can have her container. He's creating a container for her to feel safe in her emotions. You know, women who integrate develop somewhat of their own boundaries and everything, but the man can help to reinforce this, to help to protect it more, because the masculine energy is better at that, right? That's so, and that's how within a relationship they also feed, you know, they help each other. The woman helps the man to feel more and open that part of him up, and the man helps the woman to establish better boundaries by kind of like having like maybe training wheels with it, or protecting on bigger issues. And so what happens, you know, that was how the dynamics were kind of in life. So yeah, anyway, it's, I guess it's just other people's stuff coming in, like the man needs to be able to do that
I
in
thought
deal
of this scene. I thought of the scene.
to
Yeah.
protect her.
I thought of the scene from my favorite romance movie, which is Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
I haven't seen it,
So
which is
there's a
I
scene
really
where,
should, because they got together from that movie.
yeah, Jennifer Aniston got left because of how hot
I
that movie
know.
was. I don't mean to like smile because of that. I'm glad that happened. I love that fucking movie. There's a scene where they're both like assassins, and they're both really strong. And Angelina, and then you know they're both hot and they're strong and whatever. And they like, you know, there's a scene where they realize that they are each other's enemy, and they've already been in this like cold, distant phase in their marriage. And she's all like sketchy looking. She has like lingerie doing some undercover assassin stuff, and he's whatever doing, like he killing some whatever. Anyways, there's like a final shootout, and they like have each other like gun to gun, and then he does that. He does what you're describing, you know. all of a sudden the whole dynamic shifts to like it was so cool. Like it's such a like a nuanced friggin' scene. But like all of a sudden he's protecting her and it's not them against each other anymore. It's so cool because it's like obviously that's a really dramatic example, but she would have like she's like that's to some extent like if she wasn't protected, she would have become her own liability.
And I think to some extent this is part of the reason why you see in relationships that the wife can often have some issues with the husband's mother if there's a toxic dynamic there, because any kind of like poor boundaries that the man has against his mother or his sister or other women, then that leaks through and affects her, right? She's not being protected by it. Like you're just showing a weak boundary, and so other things can get in. So yeah, I mean, they're looking for that container. They're looking for a man who's going to respect the container. Wow, it's really interesting to see how it all comes together. But yeah, essentially toxic femininity, if you look at it on just like a bigger level, it's that energy without any container going everywhere and seeking places to anchor itself or to steal from. And to bring the whole conversation full circle, we have, because we got to wrap this up in 5 minutes. The social media thing, right? A lot of these people going off and gain attention from social media. The reason it's an issue is because that's violating the container, right? When people are like, a woman in that case is getting is not like in her man's kind of container. She's getting attention from all sorts of different things, and she's being affected by all sorts of things. So how is he supposed to create this boundary for her to kind of it's not possible to happen. And similarly, guys who engage in this stuff themselves, they're not interested in really like they're allowing themselves to be violated by all these different energies and things going on.
When you say it's not possible to happen, what do you mean by that?
What'd I say?
You said if the feminine is like in this like internet attention energy, it's not possible for him to infiltrate that?
Well, I think what I mean is that a man is not able to create like a real protective, and I would say to some extent leadership container, right? He's not able to sort of, if she's gained all of her attention and validation from outside of the relationship, then the more that's the case, the harder it is for the relationship to work, because you're going to have her looking like he's not able to establish this like healthy container for the relationship for like
I think that's being challenged to be redefined.
What do you mean? Collaborate.
You and I talked about how the online offline worlds are no longer separate, which I keep repeating, and I can't, I like to explore like what solutions to problems are in the collective, right? Because community is always like entering a new problem and it's about to speed up.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to say that the man, if all these chicks have a bunch of internet attention, right? We can just do that. And that's like, we can become an enemy to ourselves and then screw like the future of humanity because nobody's getting together because it's such a big problem. If we're saying there's a solution, then the only possible thing I can think of is that those things are getting redefined, which means to create the container, the validation or material or connection ROI of her internet source needs to be inferior to what she gets out of her.
Yeah, I'm not saying if you were speaking in like dogmatic terms, then the way to prevent this is for you to wear a burqa and never leave the house.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, and and I honestly think that shows to some extent, in a like a you can make all sorts of arguments about this, right? But I think when you get to extremes like that, why are you so worried? Like, I think a man who's confident in himself should be very okay with allowing his woman more freedom and even freedom of expression, right? But no, it's to exactly your point that it's a matter of where the priority is. And I think plenty of women operate health. I'm not saying women can't use the internet. Women can't be on.
I'll hold women responsible really quick.
Yeah.
A woman's self-development needs to involve understanding no matter how much attention and love and great high quality, good faith friggin' audience you build. Let's say that's true. Let's give you like the best possible position, whatever that is. It is fundamentally an us problem. If that is more validating or credible, then what is the most meaningful partnership you can ever establish in your life?
Yeah.
That is, obviously he has to do with that, his responsibility with the container and stuff, but like it's also part of feminine self-development in this new world and how things need to be redefined. You don't just get to decide that is more important and then also end up anywhere you want to be.
Yeah. And I think women who develop themselves, or who don't have quite as much of a vanity streak, because women are on a spectrum with it too, they don't necessarily fall as much into the trap. I think some might fall into the trap and then they might break out of it later on. They might kind of understand and they develop a healthier relationship with it. But it's not every woman. I mean, the manosphere will tell you differently, but not every woman is like just posting thirst traps on Instagram to get tons of simps asking them to like, show body.
Gosh, I'm so glad my Instagram algorithm is nothing like the black pillars in our Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, as always, they're taking percentages and they're amplifying it, but it is true that certainly exists. I mean, there are a few million girls on OnlyFans in the United States, right? I mean, there are certainly women who are, and before we jump off, like my opinion on the OnlyFans stuff is that
I can't believe we didn't go there.
Yeah, we'll go there on another episode, but I think a lot of it is more vanity than even lust. I mean, there's definitely dovetailing between the two things, don't get me wrong. But I think a number of those women, because you see like they jump from one to another. They become a evangelical Christian or something like that afterwards.
They want to feel sexy. Yeah, they want to feel sexy and now they want to feel pure and now they want to
they want the attention is what they want. But anyway, Trina, it's always a pleasure.
We went way too deep. They're probably like, they're going to talk about how.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, that's so fun. Always so fun. Thank you for having me, Pat.
We'll jump on another few weeks.
Sounds good.
All right, I'll see you.
Bye.